Hello and welcome to another hour here at the Golden Hour. I hope you're excited to sit down for 1 hour and do something that you're interested in doing. For me, that is going to be continuing reading Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. That is the series that I am doing until I finish the book. This wonderful book has been so wonderful that it owed me and I never finished it. But this is a chance to sit down and really give it my focus and attention. So when I'm doing a reading series, what I want to do is recap what I read the day before at the beginning of today's stream. So we're talking about early humans, and what I read yesterday was talking about, okay, if there's the genus Homo and there are human and there are many species of humans, and Sapiens is just one of those species of humans, what happened to the other ones? So he talks some about the idea of an interbreeding theory. Did the different, were the different species alike enough that they could interbreed, and so therefore, we all just kind of mingled? Or is it, pure replacement, that when the species encountered each other, they were so different that they ended up fighting, and Sapiens just happened to dominate, and so Sapiens, so he says, yeah, so he's talking about, did Sapiens interbreed with the other species of humans that they encountered? And then, or did they just erase them all without merging with them? And so he was saying, for a handful of decades, the replacement theory kind of had the upper hand. It seemed that evidence was pointing that way. But then, in an effort to map the Neanderthal genome, it turns out that 1 to 4% of our human DNA of the modern populations in the Middle East and Europe is Neanderthal DNA. And then, because that Neanderthal is one of the species of human. And then a second shot came several months later when DNA extracted from the fossilized finger from Denisova was mapped. The results proved that up to 6% of the unique human DNA of modern Melanesians and Aboriginal Australians is Denisovan DNA. So he's saying, all right, okay, it looks like there was some interbreeding. So he's saying, all right, so clearly we weren't different enough at some point that we couldn't interbreed. So let me read this. So it says, every two species that evolved from a common ancestor, such as horses and donkeys, were at one time just two populations of the same species, like bulldogs and spaniels. There must have been a point when the two populations were already quite different from one another, but still capable on rare occasions of having sex and producing fertile offspring. Then another mutation severed this last connecting thread, and they went their separate evolutionary ways. Excuse me. So he's saying, all right, so this is probably what happens. So the populations didn't merge, but that did happen a few times. So we do see those tiny traces of that happening. So he's saying, all right, that's fine. Not entirely interbreeding, not entirely replacement. It seems like there was some interbreeding. So how did Sapiens come to dominate the landscape here? And so it could be, it's like, how did we drive the other species to extinction, is what it's saying. And his answer to that is going to be language. That language was the thing that led Sapiens to end up dominating the other species and eventually eradicating the other species of humans. But I just adore some of the things he writes along the way. Imagine how things might have turned out had the Neanderthals or Denisovans survived alongside Homo sapiens. What kind of cultures, societies, and political structures would have emerged in a world where several different human species coexisted? How, for example, would religious faiths have unfolded? Would the book of Genesis have declared that Neanderthals descend from Adam and Eve? Would Jesus have died for the sins of the Denisovans? And would the Quran have reserved seats in heaven for all righteous humans, whatever their species? Would Neanderthals have been able to serve in the Roman legions or in the sprawling bureaucracy of imperial China? Would the American Declaration of Independence hold as a self-evident truth that all members of the genus Homo are created equal? Would Karl Marx have urged workers of all species to unite? So it says, over the past 10,000 years, Homo sapiens has grown so accustomed to being the only human species that it's hard for us to conceive of any other possibility. Our lack of brothers and sisters makes it easier to imagine that we are the epitome of creation, and that a chasm separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. So, yeah, that's that. So then he's going to talk about language and what makes our language special. And basically what he lays out is between 70,000 and 30,000 years ago is the beginning of history. That's when we get what he's calling the cognitive revolution. And so if language emerges as part of that, okay, but like we're not the only species to communicate. Bees communicate, ants communicate, and on and on. So then what makes our language special? And so he's going to say one answer is that our language is, he says, very supple. We can relay a large variety of information with our language. We can be very specific, things like that, so that we can relay information about threats to our survival. But then he goes on to say, but maybe more importantly, we could relay information about each other, what other humans were safe, and, or at this point, human sapiens were safe, who we could trust, who we could not trust. And so he, kind of makes the joke of, to be honest, gossip is perhaps one of the reasons we survived. So he lays out those two advantages, and then he wants to talk about the idea that perhaps fiction, um, is really the thing that pushed us over the edge. He says most likely both the gossip theory and the there is a lion near the river theory are valid. Yet the truly unique feature of our language is not its ability to transmit information about men and lions. Rather, it's the ability to transmit information about things that do not exist at all. As far as we know, only sapiens can talk about entire kinds of entities that they have never seen, touched, or smelled. Legends, myths, gods, and religions appeared for the first time with the cognitive revolution. So it says this ability to speak about fictions is the most unique feature of sapiens language. And his argument then for why fiction is so advantageous is because he says, but fiction has enabled us not merely to imagine things, but to do so collectively. We can weave common myths, such as the biblical creation story, the Dreamtime myths of the Aboriginal Australians, and the nationalist myths of modern states. Such myths give sapiens the unprecedented ability to cooperate flexibly in large numbers. So, sapiens can cooperate in extremely flexible ways with countless numbers of strangers. Okay, so that's where he's taking his argument of why fiction is important. Because suddenly, you and I, from much farther away than an intimate relationship, can have something in common that might unite us in cooperation. All right? And then he talks about cooperating. And he's talking about the size of group that could function cooperatively. And talking about how groups that function based on just intimate relationships are obviously restricted to a smallish number of people. There's just a limit to the bandwidth of a human to know and connect and be familiar with a certain number of people. Um, so it says, so like the social instincts of chimps, those of humans were adapted only for small, intimate groups. When the group grew too large, its social order destabilized and the band split. So in the wake of the cognitive revolution, gossip helped Homo sapiens to form larger and more stable bands. But even gossip has its limits. So then he's saying, kind of the natural point at which even sort of if you move from intimate based group to sort of gossip based group, you could get up to about 150 people that you could maintain a cohesive group within that amount of people. And that we continue sort of to see that today in human organizations. That it says there is no need for formal ranks, titles, and law books to keep order if you're at 150 or below. But once the threshold of 150 individuals is crossed, things can no longer work that way. And that really reminded me actually of my early career experience. I worked for a company that was growing, and I remember commenting at the time that a lot of our systems and structures were very worked and were very organic and just developed as needs arose. And that worked for a while because of the organization being smaller. But once we started to really grow, the systems that we had before simply could not work. And so that really reminded me of that like, yeah, there's a different way you can function at a smaller level that simply doesn't translate. It does not work at a larger level. So then this is about where I stopped. How did Homo sapiens manage to cross this critical threshold, eventually founding cities comprising tens of thousands of inhabitants and empires ruling hundreds of millions? The secret was probably the appearance of fiction. Large numbers of strangers can cooperate successfully by believing in common myths. Okay, so I might go back to, so that catches you up, but I might go back to things I underlined in notes I wrote because I just, there's so many things I love about what he does. Okay, so when he's talking about what caused the cognitive revolution, he says, what caused it? We're not sure. I love that answer. I always love it when people appropriately admit we don't exactly know. I don't like that when people use that as a place to hide or like a cop out, and they're still, like claiming something with vigor, but when you press them, they're like, well, I don't really know. But he's just acknowledging, not exactly sure what sparked that. But I love what he says. The most commonly believed theory argues that accidental genetic mutations changed the inner wiring of the brains of sapiens, enabling them to think in unprecedented ways and to communicate using an altogether new type of language. We might call it the tree of knowledge mutation. Why did it occur in sapiens' DNA rather than in that of Neanderthals? It was a matter of pure chance, as far as we can tell. And I really love it when people bring that up about evolution. I have a pet peeve that I feel like evolution tends to be personified when really it's this sort of tumbling around of random chance. So why did that happen to us? No reason, it just happened. So it certainly makes me wonder. I'm definitely not remembering the plot of Planet of the Apes correctly, but it makes you wonder, what if a switch like this gets flipped in other animals? Could be interesting. And it also makes me wonder, um, is that what we see some with people who seem to genuinely have forms of psychic ability? Do they just have this little random mutation that perhaps will get passed on and become more common? Maybe not, but it just kind of blips on the screen here in some people. So anyway, I love that. Um, Um, when he said legends, myths, gods, and religions appeared for the first time with the cognitive revolution. It reminded me of a great interview I like between Ricky Gervais and Stephen Colbert. And, they're both obviously known for being comedians, but if you um, watch a bunch of their material for any length of time, you'll probably learn that Ricky Gervais has an atheistic point of view and Stephen Colbert has a Catholic point of view. And so in one interview, um, they were both, bantering about their religious views. And Ricky Gervais said something like, here's the deal. If the whole world blew up and we started over again, science would emerge again. And I don't think that Christianity would. And, I thought that was a pretty fair point. Um, that, and that's what he's describing here too, that our language used to only talk about what we could see, touch, smell, hear, taste. But then it took this turn where we could talk about things that didn't exist. Um, yeah, and I think the author, I kind of admire that he doesn't pull punches, that he lumps religion in with myth and sort of puts us in our place, not only as an animal, another animal, but also reminding us that a lot of the things that we believe in and hold dear kind of come from this place of us being able to talk about things that weren't real. Um, but he also says somewhere else, yeah, because he says we can weave common myths such as the biblical creation story, the Dreamtime myths of Aboriginal Australians, and the nationalist myths of modern states. Like we're so used to thinking of our countries as real, but they're really just collective ideas. Um, what else? What else? I think those were the main notes I had made. So, anyway, that's my. And that, by the way, is why it takes me so long to read books like this. Who knows how long this dang series might take me, because it's just so fascinating and it leads you on so many other thought tangents. But that also provides rich conversation here. So I don't know that I'll always prattle on this long. That looks like it was about 20 minutes. Um, you can always turn me down and start studying if that goes too long. But I'm going to continue reading and I will reset our timer and we can get started if you're not already. see your comment about the cats. I can go look. Dottie is asleep on the couch, and I don't see any sign of Lewis. Oh, I do see Lewis. He's at the top of the stairs. Hi! Think about that. Think about it. tried to catch Louis. And I snuck under the table. Okay, that's the end of the hour. I am snickering about what we can cover tomorrow. I read very little because I did take the time to at least sort of consolidate the main sort of bullet points of what I had read up to this point. Um, because, yeah, I'm trying to figure out how I can internalize books like this that feel study worthy, not just read worthy. Anyway, I hope you're happy with what you accomplished today, and I will see you again tomorrow. Bye bye.